All right, greetings students in Math 123, Finite Math. So we're going to begin today with reviewing, hopefully, how to do linear equations and solving equations. Very important skill in this class. You'll do it all throughout the semester. So in general, I'm going to talk about what this property of equality says, and I kind of like to think of solving an equation a lot like a balance scale. So what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side to keep it in balance. So if you have this balance scale, if you took away 20 pounds there, you would have to take away 20 pounds there in order to keep everything in balance. Okay. So what we're going to do is kind of look at some basic equations to begin with. So what you're always doing essentially is you're trying to isolate that variable x by itself on a side, and you're undoing operations. Okay, some of these you can do in your head. You can do this in your head. The answer's got to be 2, because 2 plus 8 is 10. Well, the way you think of this is I want to undo the operation of adding. I don't want the 8 to be there, so what I can do is I can subtract 2. I take away 2 there, and I got to do the same thing on that side. What happens, 2, that's not very good, teacher. You know what I'm doing? The reason I'm saying that is because I'm thinking ahead about what the answer is going to be. I need to take away 8. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's see. That's going to be x. Technically, that's now plus 0. That goes to 0, and that's equal to 2. You don't have to write that step, but that's technically what we have. So the answer is x equals 2. If you check the answer, what you always do when you check the answer is just plug that into the original problem. The original problem would now be 2 plus 8 equals 10, which of course is correct. So the beauty of this kind of problem is you know you're right, okay, and you find out. Okay, this problem right here, when you see 5x, that's the same as 5 multiplied by x, okay? So you're trying to get rid of the operation of multiplying. The undoing operation of multiplication is division. So what you do here is you divide both sides by 5. What that technically gives you is 1 times x, and then negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. 1 times x is just x. Anytime you multiply a number by 1, it's itself. So the answer would be this, okay? Right, how do you check? Well, you just plug it back in, do what the problem tells you to do. The problem is saying 5 times what number is negative 15. That answer plugs in. Negative 15 is equal to negative 15, so you're right. Okay, so it's all about the undoing operation. The opposite of adding is subtracting. Opposite of subtracting is adding. Opposite of multiplying is dividing. Opposite of dividing is multiplying. So you're undoing operations until x is by itself. So you can think of an equation as numbers tied in a knot, and you're untying the knot. Okay, so what we have is negative 2 times x equals 18. On this, again, the undoing operation of multiplication is division. So we do this. That wipes that out. Technically, when you divide any number by itself, you get 1. So we have 1 times x. 18 divided by negative 2 is negative 9. And 1 times any number is itself, so you get that. Okay, so that's your answer. Check it, plug it back in. You have negative 2 times the answer. Negative 9 is 18. That's true because 2 negatives multiplied give a positive. Many of you may need to review your rules for multiplication. All right. So the next thing we have here is this takes a couple of steps. So when we do this, there's 2 operations you got to get rid of. You're trying again to get x by itself. That means you got to get rid of the minus 6 and the multiply by 2. And think of the operation. And you have to do this in a certain order or it's a little bit too complicated. So we want to start here. The opposite undoing operation of subtracting is adding. So notice I do the same thing to both sides to keep this in balance. Okay, so technically what you would have now is 2x plus 0 technically. You don't have to write that step. And then 10 plus 6 is 16. Okay. When you add 0 to anything, it's itself. Now you're going to get rid of the multiplication. So the undoing property for multiplication is going to be dividing by 2. Again, this will give you 1 times x is equal to 8. So the answer is 8. Okay, when you check the answer, you want to just write down the problem, which is 2 times the answer minus 6 equals 10, and just verify that. So plug the 8 back in. You would have, you got to follow order of operations. You multiply before you subtract. So 16 minus 6 is equal to 10. So we have 10 equals 10, so it works out. So see, on every one of those problems, it didn't take much time to verify that I was correct, okay? So these are basic equations that take 1 or 2 steps, all right? So I'm going to move on to the next page, do a couple others, and on my videos, I always go through some examples, and then I let you pause the video and try some yourself, and I think that's real important when you're doing this, is to try to do some things yourself, then resume the video and see if you're on the right track. That's real important that you do that. Okay, next problem. You can think of this negative x, if you want to, as negative 1 times x. Okay, that might help you a little bit to understand the problem. So I'm going to write it this way, as negative 1 times x plus 9 is equal to 0. The undoing operation, now I've got to get rid of the plus 9 and the multiplied by negative 1. I start here. Okay, you want to do that division step at the very end. So undoing addition is done by subtraction. So I do that. Okay, what that will leave you is negative 1 times x. Now you don't have to write the plus 0 there. You can just ignore that, and then 0 minus 9 is negative 9. And then the undoing operation of multiplying by negative 1 is to divide by the same number. Always divide by the same number that you're trying to get rid of. Okay, so that gives 1x, or x equals, and then when you divide 2 negatives, you get a positive. Okay, on that down. Okay, and then if you check the answer, this would go like this. It's just negative of the answer. Okay, the answer is 9, so you'd write it like that. Plus 9 equals 0, that's right. And anytime you take a negative number plus its opposite, you're going to get 0. Okay. All right, then we do one last problem here. This one, again, you want to get x by itself, so that means you want to get rid of the 18 and the negative 12 in that order. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this then. So we're going to undo the addition of 18 by subtracting 18. Okay, that'll go to 0. So you can write this as negative 12 times x. Now you can write plus 0 or just leave it alone. And then you got 2 negatives. So if you're adding 2 negatives, think of that as 2 debts. You're totaling debts. So a debt of 30 and a debt of 18 is a total debt of 48. All right, then we want to undo the multiplication by dividing by the same number. That'll wipe that out. And now have x. And then when you divide 2 negatives, it's a positive. You can take your calculator if you need to. 48 divided by 12 is 4. So the answer to that problem would be x equals 4. And then check, and don't be lazy about checking. I'm serious about that. Students are kind of bad about that. Number one, checking verifies that you're right, which is important. The other thing is it practices your arithmetic, okay, which students a lot of times in this level of class need to get back in the flow of being able to do arithmetic okay. All right, so I just write it out like this. So notice I'm just writing out the equation, and then I'm going to plug in the answer of 4. Work it out. So you got to multiply before you add. So negative 12 times 4 is negative 48. Okay, you add this. Think about money. You have a debt of 48. You have $18. You have more debt than you do money. So subtract the 2 to get 30. But since you have more debt than you do money, and that would be negative. Okay, so that checks out like that. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to have you do is just scroll down. I'm going to let you work on these 4 problems. Now, what I'd like you to do is pause the video, work it out, When you're ready to check, resume, and then as soon as you resume, you'll be able to see the answers. Okay, so resuming, go ahead and check your answers. If you got any of these wrong, you need to study over what I did and then check over the details, all right? Your steps don't have to look exactly the way mine do, but you do need to show some steps on this, because what you're trying to learn how to do is learn the process, because most of the time you can't do this in your head. The first one you can do in your head. The second one you can probably do in your head too, and it's easy to tell you're right. This is just 5 times 5 is 25. This is 38 minus 18 is 20. But they get a little bit harder to do in your head, so you want to know that process, okay? And don't be lazy about checking. I'll keep saying that. All right. So what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to scroll down the bottom. Anytime you need to pause the video, you can do that. You can rewind and everything too in an online class. So can't ask questions during my video, but you can rewind and review a problem if you need to at any time. All right, so this one, the next thing we're going to do is when we have variables on both sides. So this one, you have an x on both sides. So what you typically do is decide which side you want the x to be on, and that's up to you. It doesn't really matter. You can either have the x's on the left side, or you could have the x on the right side at the end of the problem. It doesn't matter. That's totally up to you. I do think on these problems, the important thing to do is to start by kind of getting your x in the right place, okay, and try to just do one step at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and just write this problem down, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can do this. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to get rid of the 2x, okay, so I don't want any x's on the right side. That's a decision I make, so I'm going to do this to both sides. All right, you don't have to put that line under it necessarily. So what's going to happen is 5x minus 2x is 3x. And see, I put that under the like term. That's like 5 apples, take away 2 apples is 3 apples. You can think of x as an object if you want to. Then that's plus 3, that's still there. Now that's really 0 plus 20, so now it's 20. So we have that. Okay, now we're down to the problems we just did. We want to get rid of the 3 added, then the 3 multiplied, and we want to do it in that order. So the opposite operation of adding is subtracting. So I want to do that. That'll wipe that out. So I have 3x plus nothing, or just 3x equals 17 now. Then I divide by 3. And yeah, you'll get fraction answers sometimes on these problems. And don't freak out if you get a fraction answer. That's normal. It's abnormal if you get a whole number answer, okay? So I'm going to divide by 3, and then you just want to leave the answer like that. You don't need to get a decimal. You could, but it's not necessary. Your fractions just need to be reduced. So if I took a calculator and did 17 divided by 3, then I get these repeating decimals. And that's why I don't want to write the answer that way, because it's not precise. The precise answer is 17/3. So you don't need to do that, okay? So we'll stop there at that, and I'll go through the checking. And the checking is a good exercise because it basically sees how well you know how to work with fractions. So let me show you how this would go down. Watch carefully. So we have 5 times the answer plus 3, and we're going to see if that's equal to 2 times the answer plus 20. All right, well, let's not use a calculator on this, okay? It's not necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the 17/3, and whenever you multiply fractions, I'm going to do a little bit of this work at the side. So if you have 5 times 17/3, you put the 5 over 1, and then you multiply straight across. Now you could use your calculator on this if you wanted to. So 17 times 5 is 85. So this part right here would become 85 over 3. You want to bring down the 3 and then go to this side and do the same thing. You have 2 times 17/3. Put that over 1, go straight across. 2 times 17 is 34. 1 times 3 is 3. You multiply fractions, just multiply the numerator, multiply the denominator, straight across. So that's 34 thirds plus 20 like that. Okay, now what you got to get into is you want to get common denominator. So I'm going to put this 3 over 1. The common denominator between 3 and 1 is 3. So you want to multiply by 3 over 3. And then this is going to give 85 thirds plus 9 thirds. Now notice that 9 thirds is 3. Now I just do this. I keep the denominator. I add the numerator. 85 plus 9 is 94. And we do that. And then that's the end of that side. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the right side. Put that over 1. Common denominator is 3. You got to multiply both the top and the bottom by 3 to introduce that common denominator. So now this is 34 over 3 plus 60 over 3. So if you work that out, that is also 94 over 3. Okay, you can do that. A lot of times students just never in their background got fractions down very good, and you have to know how to multiply, divide, add, subtract fractions without a calculator. That's important. Okay, now I do want to show you something on the calculator. I'm going to pull up my calculator and show you. This is, I really want you to be able to do what I just did, because it's not hard, and the student needs to know that. So you could also go 5 times 17 over 3 plus 3. See, that's the left side of the equation. And then I could do the right side. I just go 2 times 17 over 3 and then plus 20 and do it that way. All right. Okay, so it works out. I mean, you can do it that way, but I think it sure is beneficial to know how to do this by hand. All right. Okay, so let's see. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to do this. A lot of times on my notes, I can go through and slide that thing over there so you can kind of see if you need to how I put that in my calculator. Okay, so now we're going to go over a problem that's got the distributive property in it. So I'm going to write this down, and you want to remember and recall what the distributive property is and how that works. Okay, so just in general, anytime you have a number, I'm going to just kind of go at the side of the paper and show you something like this. Well, then you multiply. 5 times 2x is 10x, and then 5 times 3 is 15, and then you just bring that sign down. The reason this works, it's easy to show a student that this is why this works. I'm just going to make up an arithmetic problem and show you. See, this problem right here is really 2 times 8, okay, because 3 plus 5 is 8, and then 2 times 8 is 16. Okay, that's what that is. That's the answer to the problem, but it works if you do this. 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 5 is 10, and then add them together and you get 16. So it works. Okay, the distributive property is something that you have to do in this problem to start off with. So we start this way. We go 3 times 2x is 6x. You can think of that as a negative. 3 times 5 is 15, so that just bring down the minus. Same thing here. 2 times x is 2x. You're just doing 2 times 1. And then 2 times 7 is 14. It's a positive, so you get that. All right. Now it's just like the last problem we did. We have variables on both sides. You make the decision as to which side you want the x's on. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to choose to get rid of the 2x. So I start by subtracting 2x from both sides. Notice I line that up under that like term. Okay, so this is going to give 4x minus 15. That goes to 0. 0 plus 14 is 14. Okay, now I got 2 steps. I got to get rid of the 15, then the multiply by 4. The opposite of subtracting 15 is adding 15. So I'm going to do that. So that's 4x is equal to 29. And then divide both sides by 4. And then again, leave your answer this way. Okay, so that's x equals 29 over 4. So that would be your solution to your problem right there. All right, just leave the answer like that. Okay, now again, I'm going to do this. I'm going to check this by hand. And then I'm going to show you the calculator also. Right? You should know how to do both. Right? So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to go 3 times 2 times the answer. The answer is 29 over 4. And then minus 5. That's the left-hand side. The right-hand side, we have 2 times the answer, 29 over 4 plus 7. Now, I'm going to do this without a distributive property. You don't have to do distributive property when you check. So I'm going to just kind of focus in on these 2 parts of the problem. I'm going to focus on that part first of all. Okay, and I'm going to do this at the side. It's just you're doing 2 times 29 over 4. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can multiply straight across. If you did that, you would have 58 over 4, but then you would have to reduce that. And these are even numbers, so they divide by 2. Anyway, so 58 divided by 2 is 29. 4 divided by 2 is 2. You can also, you probably remember this and done this before, you can reduce this fraction. You can divide both by 2 since they're even numbers. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Then go straight across. See, 1 times 29 is 29. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so this would now give you 3 times 29 over 2 minus 5. And then this side, I'm just going to write down because we're going to do this next step kind of at the same time. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do what's inside the parentheses and just focus on that. Okay, so I'm going to get a common denominator and do this. So I'm going to put this over 1. The common denominator between 2 and 1 is 2, so I multiply by 2 over 2. Okay, like that. So this is 3 times 29 over 2. This will become minus 10 over 2, like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just finish up this side. So that's now going to be 3 times, that's 19 over 4. If you multiply that straight, or subtract and keep, not 4, 2, you keep the denominator. Okay, so you do that. And then put that over 1, multiply straight across. So you do 3 times 19. Anytime you want to use a calculator, you can. Okay, I can do this in my head, but you can use your calculator. Oh. I think that's 57. Yeah, okay, so that's 57 over 2. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to get a common denominator, put that over 1. Common denominator is 4, so multiply by 4 over 4. Okay, what I'm going to get is 2 times 29 over 4 plus 28 over 4. Again, I'm multiplying straight across there. And then I can combine this. I get 2 times, and if I take 28 and 29 and add that, you can use your calculator again if you want to. That's 57. So that would be 57 over 4. Okay, like that. Then I'm going to put this over 1. And when I reduce this fraction, 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So notice I'm going to get the same answer. So that's 1 times 57 is 57 over 2. So that gives the same answer. That verifies that you're right. Okay. All right. So that one is, that's how you would check that by hand, you know, instead of changing stuff to decimals. Students hardly ever want to do it that way, and you need to know how to do it that way. All right, so if you were going to check it on the calculator, we would just go back to the beginning, and you can put in your parentheses like this. You can say 3 times parenthesis 2 times 29 over 4 minus 5, close parentheses. And all that's going to do is that's just going to do give you a decimal answer. Okay, it does that. Then we do the right side. So we do 2 times parentheses 29 divided by 4 plus 7, close parentheses, and it'll give the same thing. Okay. So that's how you can verify that with a calculator. Okay, so if you're doing a test or something, you've got the ability to tell you're right. How long did it take me to put that in my calculator? Like 30 seconds. Okay, seriously, okay? You want to do that. You want to know if you're right. Okay, so I'm going to move the next page. Pause if you need to. Those problems are a little harder. And what we'll do here is I'm going to show you an alternative way to do this problem, and then I'll let you do a couple of problems. Okay, so what I'm going to do is these two problems, you're going to see me doing the problems more this way. You can move things from one side to another. So I'm going to show you on this one, we want to have the x's on the left side and the numbers on the right side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 12x and I'm going to move it over there. I'm going to leave the 15x where it is. Don't touch that. But when I move the positive 12x, it becomes a minus 12x, because what you're doing is subtracting 12x from both sides. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the minus 8 and I'm going to move it over here. So I leave the 10 where it is, and that's a positive number. And then when I move the minus 8, it becomes plus 8. Okay, this is a way to kind of speed up the process of solving an equation. So if you move a quantity to the other side, then it just changes the sign. So now these are like terms. 15 apples minus 12 apples is 3 apples. And then that's 18. And then you can do the last step. You can divide by 3, or even do this in your head. So you would get x is equal to 6. Okay, so that's an alternative methodology for doing that problem. Okay, let's see. Let's do the next one here. You would have to start the distributive property. So I do negative 3 times x is negative 3x. I do negative 3 times positive. See, that's a negative times a positive, which is a negative. So I'm going to write that as minus 24 as a result. Okay, when I go to this side, I've got 2 times x is 2x. And then 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these things. Now, it's up to you how you do this. So it's totally up to you which side. Just for something different, this time I'm going to move the 3x to this side and leave the 2x where it is. Okay, so when I do that, I would have 2x plus 3x. Okay, and the reason I did that is because that's a negative. It's up to you, though. Then I'm going to move the minus 8 over here to join the negative 24. So I'd have negative 24 plus 8. So I just decided to get x on the right side. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. Okay, think of this as debt added to money. You have more debt than you do money, so it's debt. So if you just take 24 minus 8, that would give 16. So that's negative 16. And then this is equal to 5x. All right, now what's the last step? You would just divide by 5. And then you want that fraction answer. So that would be x equals negative 16 over 5. Okay, so that's an alternative way to do that problem. I think that's the best habit to learn when you're solving equations, is to move things, rearrange. After you've done a distributive property, just start rearranging. Get all the x's on one side, all the numbers on the other. You can just move stuff, but be sure you change the sign. All right, so the next problems, I'm going to have you do 2 problems, and then I'll let you pause the video, and that way you can check when you're done. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so you can go ahead and check and see if you got the right answers on this. Now, what I did, you didn't have to do this exactly the way I did this. You know, you can do equations in several different ways. There's only one answer, though. So what I did on this, I want to just move things. So this what I moved the 5, so it became 7x minus 5x. I leave the 7x where it is. The 5x changes sign when you move it. Then I moved the negative 6, so it became plus 6. So once you learn how to do that, then it makes it real easy to get the x's on one side, numbers on the other. So that's 2x equals negative 18, and then you got your answer. Okay, you can verify the checking. You want to make sure you're able to do that okay. This one you start with the distributive property, so 3x minus 18. You got to watch the distributive property, make sure you don't make mistakes on that. 5x plus 50. Then again, I decided to move the 5x, so it became negative. Move the negative 18, it became positive. So I've got negative 2x equals 68. Divide by negative 2. You have a positive divided by negative is a negative. Okay, so then it checks out. You can see how I did the checking. So that's what you should have come up with on that problem. All right, so I'm going to move on. Pause if you need to pause. We're going to kind of build up our equation skill on this section just bit by bit. So I'm going to go on to this, and then we'll kind of finish up equation solving with when you have an equation with fractions. So what I'm going to do is just one problem and let you try one problem like this where you collect like terms. So this is probably as complex as it gets, you know, as far as the number of steps you have to do. You're going to start by doing distributive property. We're going to do that and that. Okay, now see that 8's not in parentheses, so it's not part of that distributive property. So you'd have 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 4 is 8, and then bring down the 8. Same thing over here, 4 times x is 4x, 4 times negative 5 is negative 20, and then minus 10. Okay, now collect like terms. So if you look at the like terms, those go together. Those are numbers, and then those are numbers. Just on each side, collect them. So negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So you get negative 2x plus 0. On this side, negative 20 minus 10 is negative 30. While I'm thinking of this, I do want to show you a couple things because sometimes students are not very familiar with graphing calculators, and you're going to need a graphing calculator for this class. You pretty well have to have one, in fact. Either a TI-83 or a TI-84 is the preferred calculator. I'm going to use an 84 when I'm recording videos. I wanted to mention that this is the negative. So if you're doing this side, you would go negative 20. But then this is subtract 10, so you go subtract 10 like that, okay? And it'll give you the answer, so you want to make sure that you're cautious. You don't want to have to rely on your calculator for something like that, but you can check and verify, and if the numbers are kind of big, you can use a calculator. All right, so what I'm going to do next is this is 2x plus 0 is just 2x equals 4x minus 30. Now what I'm going to do is I want that x to move over here, so all of the x's are on the left side. So we have 2x, that changes sign to minus 4x, then the negative 30, we leave that alone, okay? Collect the like terms, 2 minus 4 is negative 2x, that's equal to negative 30, and then we close this off by undoing the multiplication by dividing by the same number. Always divide by the same number, okay? So we get x is equal to, and then you divide a negative by a negative, you get a positive. Okay? All right, so realistically, I mean, you want to get to a point where you don't have to touch your calculator on a problem like that, but you should not make any mistakes on arithmetic because until you gain a lot of confidence in your arithmetic skills by hand, and you can check every step you do on a calculator, say, okay? All right, so what I'm going to have you do is pause, and I'm going to have you work this problem out and see how you do. Okay, go ahead and go for it. Okay, so you want to go ahead and check the answer. You should have got x equals 5. Again, your work doesn't have to be precisely like mine. You just have to follow the rules of algebra when you're working with both sides of an equation. So first thing you want to do is check the first step. Students often make mistakes on this first step with signs. So we go negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. And notice here, think of that as a negative times a negative. Okay, see, that's a subtraction symbol, but you can treat it as a negative. So negative times negative is positive 9x, and then plus 1. Okay, the 1's not in parentheses, so, you know, don't distribute the 3 by that. Over here, a lot of times I see students go 14 plus 2 and get 16. That's not right. Okay, you're going against the order of operations. You multiply always before you add. So bring down the 14, and then 2x plus 16 is what you have. Now what I did is I highlighted the like terms. So after you do distributive property, put things together. Don't start moving things yet until everything is condensed. So -6 plus 1 is -5. I still have the plus 9x. Still have the 2x. 14 plus 16 is 30. It doesn't matter what order you put this in. I mean, you could have 9x minus 5 equals 30 plus 2x, and that's the same. Okay, it doesn't matter. Now is where I start moving stuff. So I decided all my x's on the left, I moved the 2, so it's going to become negative. I moved the -5, so it's going to become positive. So whatever you move, change the sign. Now it's easy. You have 7x equals 35, divide by 7. So 35 divided by 7 is 5. Okay, so that's it. So hopefully you're doing okay with this. We're trying to build up our level of skill. And when you're doing homework and stuff, you want to get to a point where you whip through these with ease, seriously. Okay, at this level of class, you want to get this down and get it down fast. Okay, but you got to practice it. If you're out of practice, you got to work on it. There's no learning this unless you practice it. It's like the musical instrument that I play. All right, I practice every day, and I've been doing that for 40 years. All right, so the idea with equations with fractions, so we're going to go ahead and finish this video with these examples with fractions. So when you're dealing with fractions, first of all, don't freak out. Students always freak out when they see an equation with fractions. No. You can get rid of the things anyway, and once you do, it's the same thing you just got through doing. So you got to know what the common denominator is, first of all. So the way to do a common denominator, there's a couple of ways, okay? If you have 3 and 2, well, one thing you can do is you can do 3 times 2 and get 6. If you multiply, that doesn't necessarily always give you the smallest common denominator, but it'll give you something that'll work in this problem. The way I look at this is like this. If you were to go through and count by 3s, 3, 6, 9, you can count as far as you want to. If you count by 2s, at some point in time, they have to overlap, and where they overlap is what we call a least common multiple, and that's what a common denominator is. So what we're going to do on this, first thing I want you to do is just write down the problem like this. Just take the time to write this down and write lots of steps, guys. You got to learn to do that, okay, and be neat. Write big. Okay, so we're going to multiply by 6, and we're going to multiply that side by 6. Okay. Now, when I do this, I'm doing distributive property. The whole key to getting this problem right is to write your steps correctly. So I take this, I go 6 over 1 times the first part. The first part of this is this. So I just write it down for now, just x plus 2 over 3. Because what we're going to do is reduce the 6 and 3 anyway. All right, then bring down the plus sign, then do the same thing. Okay, take the 6 times this. Okay, so we're going to multiply by that, and then we're going to write this as this. This will be 6 over 1 again times x minus 1 over 2. So see, all I'm doing is a distributive property. I just hadn't done the distributive property yet because I'm not ready to do that. So I just distribute, then I will multiply these numbers out next. And then, of course, 10 times 6 is 60. That's the key to the problem, is to get this step on your paper correctly. Now, what I do is you want to reduce. You don't want to multiply the 6 by x plus 2. You want to reduce these fractions. That's the whole point of what we're doing. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now write this as 2 times x plus 2, see. We got rid of the fraction, okay? All right, and then same thing here. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now we're left with plus 3 times x minus 1 equals 60. So that's the whole key to the problem, is to do that like that. All right, and really, if you look at the original problem, we have x plus 2 over 3. All I did is multiply by 6. 6 over 3 is 2, so I get this. Up here, same thing. I'm multiplying by 6. 6 over 2 is 3, so I get that. I mean, you can learn to do that in your head, but students, if they're lazy about writing steps, forget stuff. So it's best when you're a beginner to write everything out. Okay, now I do distributive property. So 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 2 is 4. Same thing here. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 1 is, and that's negative 3, equals 60. Now you got like terms, so you want to collect. Those go together, and these go together. So put them together. So 2x plus 3x is 5x. 4 minus 3 is positive 1. So we have that. Okay, now it's just got one step and then a couple of steps and we're done. And you can move if you want to. So if you want to move the 1, you would end up getting 5x equals 60 minus 1. So that would be, I'll move this kind of over here. So what I would get here is 5x equals 59. Then I can divide both sides by 5 and I get a fraction answer, which is very typical. Just make sure that fraction answer is reduced. Okay, so that's as far as you can take that problem. Okay, so this is about as complicated as it gets as far as solving equations in this class, seriously. Okay, if you can do this, all the other problems we've been doing will be easy for you. They really will. Okay, I'm going to look at the next one. And again, what we have is we have 5, 3, and 2. Now, if you multiplied that, you would get 30. So 30 will work. Or you can do it this way. You can just count by the biggest number. This is the way I do this a lot of times. Just count by the biggest number. Okay, 3 doesn't go into 10, so that's no good. Go to 15. 3 goes into 15, but 2 doesn't, so that's no good. Go to 20. 3 does not go into 20, so forget that. Go to 25. 2 does not go into 25. But finally, when you get to 30, what happens is 30 divided by 3 comes out even, and 30 divided by 2 also turns out to be a whole number. So that's why that's the common denominator. So again, what we'll do is we'll write down the problem. Just write it down, put a big set of parentheses on the left side, and we're going to multiply this side by 30 to get rid of the fraction. It's a good idea to just put that as 30 over 1. And then the right side, we have 1/2. And again, you got to do the same thing to both sides of the equation to keep it in balance. So we have that. Okay, now you can learn to do this next step in your head. I don't recommend it to somebody that's at this level of a class necessarily. So I just distribute. So I'm going to write this as 30 over 1 times the first part, which is 2x minus 1 over 5. So I'm just taking that part and writing it down. That's all I'm doing. Okay, the minus sign, write it down. The 30, multiply it out. So you're going to have 30 over 1, just write it down, times the second part of the problem, x over 3. Okay, like that. And then this side right here, I'm just going to write it down for now. That way we can do the fractions all in one step. So that's really what you want to do on your paper then, is get that written out like that. That's not a bad idea. If you're a real visual person, I'm very visual, you can use colors so the step jumps out to you a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do, another thing that sometimes helps students, is to just kind of box in the part of the problems. There's really 3 problems we're doing with fractions here. And all we do is reduce. That's all we do. Okay, what we're going to do here is 30 divided by 5 is 6. So that leaves us with 6 times 2x minus 1. Okay, we do the same thing here. 30 divided by 3 is 10. So that would leave us with minus 10x. All right, this side, same thing. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So it gives 15. So by doing that step, so you don't have any fractions left over at all. Right, and we do this. So this would be distributive, would be 12x minus 6 minus 10x equals 15. You have like terms, so you want to put those together. Okay, that's 2x minus 6 equals 15. Now you can either add 6 to both sides or you can move the 6. If you move the 6, you're going to get 2x equals 15 plus 6. So that's 2x equals 21. Then you can divide both sides by 2. So you get x equals 21 over 2. Okay, that's how that goes. All right, so that would be the final answer to that problem. Just to make sure you have a reduced fraction. Don't really want decimal answers on these, okay? Okay, so to close off the video, if you need to pause and kind of review what I'm doing, you can do that. Otherwise, go ahead and we'll go here, and I'll give you a little bit of time to do these problems here then. Okay, so go ahead and pause. Okay, so here's the answers you should have got. Now, you may have done this different. I suspect that a lot of you didn't use the same common denominator I did. You just multiplied and did something else. I bet a lot of you used 8 on this. If you multiply both sides by 8, you still would have got my answer, by the way. And I'm going to redo it that way in a minute, just in case you did it that way, because I expect a lot of people did it that way. But really, you can go like this. If you were to list out the multiples, they overlap at 4. And it's beneficial to use the smallest. Same thing happens on the next one. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you didn't just multiply it together, and you'd get a real big number if you did that. So you can go like this, 12, 6, 3. If you just start writing out multiples, the way I'm doing here, so they all overlap at 12. All right, and the smaller you get, the better it is for you. So I'm going to kind of explain what I did here. So when I multiply by 4, I'm going to end up just having 4 times the first part, x plus 1 over 4, minus 4 over 1 times a half, and then 12 times 4. And all that happens is reduce, okay? The 4's cross out, you get 1 times x plus 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. 48. Once you get to this point here, you're probably going to do okay. That's the key, is to get that point there. Then that's just x plus 1 minus 2. Add the like terms. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. You can add 1 to both sides, so you get 49. Okay. The next one I multiplied by 12. So again, I just take this first piece, bring that down, multiply by 12. The second piece, same thing. Got the plus sign, so that's there. 12 times that, and then 12 times the part on the other side. Now see, all I do is reduce. 12 over 12 is 1, so that's 1 times 3x plus 5. 12 over 6 is 2, that's 2 times x minus 2. 12 over 3 is 4, you have that. And that right there is the key to the problem. Once you get that put together, the rest of it's pretty standard equation solving. So I distributed, did the distributive property, collected like terms. Then I moved the 4x and moved the 1. So I ended up getting x equals negative 5. Okay. So you can do it that way. So it doesn't matter what you multiply by as long as it gets rid of the fraction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, before I close off this video, I was just going to go ahead and show you how this would work. If you did like this first one, if you multiplied by 8, because I suspect a lot of you multiplied by 8. So if you multiplied by 8, you would have 8 times x plus 1 over 4 minus a half equals 12 times 8. If you did it this way, you would have 8 over 1 times x plus 1 over 4. Bring down the minus and then distribute like this. So you'd have 8 over 1 times a half. And then that would be 96. Okay, reduce. 8 over 4 is 2, so you would have 2 times x plus 1. 8 over 2 here is 4, so that would be minus 4 equals 96. Distribute, you're going to have 2x plus 2 minus 4 is equal to 96. So what you'll have here then is these are like terms, so that's 2x minus 2 equals 96. Then you can move the 2 to get 2x equals 96 plus 2. Then you have 2x equals 98. Then you have to divide by 2. So you're going to get 49 by doing it that way. It's not wrong to do it that way. It's just the numbers are bigger, so I think students are more likely to make mistakes if they do it that way. So you want to make sure that to help you, you want to make sure that you're looking for that smallest common denominator. All right, so I'm going to end this video here. I do this video in more than one part. That takes care of the equation solving aspect. Okay, so get your notes taken down, and then you can look at the second part of the video that I'll have posted for inequalities.